This is happiness, to be everything at once. Be unblinded, be unlearned, be unbridled and unburned.
Hey everyone, welcome back to a brand new episode of Mood Prep. My name is Dave Nixon, and today we're going to continue on with the Enneagram typologies and move on to Type 5, the Investigator. So, if you haven't already, once again, go back to a week ago's podcast. And on that podcast, I spoke about the Wisdom of the Enneagram, which actually is a book by Don Riso and Russ Hudson. And it just goes on to speak in that podcast about what the Enneagram is and why I use it and why I recommend it and where you can go to do it. So for those of you that are listening in last week, I mentioned about a person who did a song for each type. And so what that was is that he basically put together the song and sung it as if they were coming from that type. It's really quite beautiful, which I really heavily considered. I probably should have done it both in my book and for this podcast, was to do each typology as that typology. But either way, we're here now, and this is just how it is. But we're going to go through the Type 5 today. So the Type 5 is the Investigator. So the Investigator is often seen as like the most cerebral type. So if you want to find a bunch of Type 5s, you could probably go to an engineering conference. That's where your computer conference or something like that. That's the people that are mostly can be very heavily introverted and really cerebral and really disconnected from the body. It doesn't mean all of them. A lot of the Type 5s are, funnily enough, can be fantastic marathon runners or long distance runners, but a lot of them, the intention behind the running is to get out of their own head. So they're doing it as a relief from being in their head so much, which is quite interesting. Yet some of the people that I really look up to in the fitness industry, one of them being Alan Romero, who I had on this show a number of times last year, he runs a strong Type 9 and Type 5. And so for him, it's really about understanding, and Type 5s really lean into the how. So they're very how philosophical rather than why. And so for that, it's like, how does the body function? How does it like work together as a unit? Like, what's actually going on? And they can get really in their heads about it. So the average 5 can get really in their heads about it, yet they're coming forward with these ideas of how things work. That's why when there's a broken computer, they want to know how it's broken. They don't give a shit why, really. They're kind of interested more in the how. It's a really simple explanation, but that's often how the Type 5s come to be. So the investigators want to, as the name suggests, go in and investigate what's going on. And so when the Type 5 becomes healthier and they start to integrate, they actually start to take on the qualities of the Type 8. And in doing so, they take on the qualities that are going to allow them to be a lot more direct, a lot more body orientated as well. So they want to be more the word wouldn't be energetic necessarily, but a lot more exposed to emotion and actually allowing that to flow through them, so to speak. So the 5s move from this sort of introverted cerebral type, and then when they're healthier, they actually start to move more and get connected with their bodies. They become a little bit more grounded in doing so. One of the interesting things around the 5s is how they really sort of are one of the most introverted types, and in doing so, it was often from this sort of childhood patterning of not wanting to deal with whatever maybe challenges they had. Like an example could be fights in the house through their parental figures, and in doing so, they kind of felt disconnected from both parental figures, and because of that, they actually went and secluded themselves and went and played by themselves, or maybe they went and sort of tried to figure out how things work. They started to pull things apart to learn how it got to distract them from dealing with potential difficulties that made them feel uncomfortable. And so they kind of just detach and get lost in their own thoughts. And as adults, they still do that. If there's difficult things, they might not want to have to deal with that, and so they often get lost in their own thoughts. So that's like, fuck, is that the time? I didn't realize. And they're either working or they're playing video games or they're doing something along those lines, which ends up being an escape from dealing with something that they actually don't want to deal with. So really interesting stuff from the introverted perspective of why they actually are more introverted. They're also most likely to have this like they're the ones, here's a way to think about it, they will look to collect things. Now, each type could collect things, but this is often a secret collection, and they don't want to tell anyone about it. And so if they're going to show you about their secret collection, it's like they trust you not to judge them, not to think poorly of them, not to start to, I suppose, laugh at them and then feel embarrassed about their own personal collection of whatever the fuck they're collecting, which is really interesting. I had my seminar, the mood prep seminar. I pointed out to one of the boys there who has a collection of Warhammer games, and his partner was there as well, and he's like, "Yes, it's my collection," and then his partner was like, "Oh, and I've seen it." It was quite humorous in sort of seeing that. But what it was really speaking to was this idea of how it's like that's something that he doesn't speak about with openly. He's a coach with people on the floor. But if you get close to him and he trusts you, it's just a pattern that they lean into. It's like, well, here's something that I have, and let me tell you about all the amazing things about this intricate detail of this stuff. And a lot of the times people don't care about it, right? Now, I'm not saying specifically about this Warhammer stuff. I'm saying overall around whatever it may be that they're interested in. And so when the fives start to move more into an unhealthy space, interesting enough, they kind of get out of their heads again and they start to disintegrate into a type 7, right? And so the type 7 becomes more of this sort of scattered pattern. They start to act out more. They start to maybe become more social, but it's actually more of like an anxious social and acting outside of themselves. And it almost looks like this is something that should be good for them. However, it's often a way that they are escaping dealing with what they need to deal with. It's very different to the leaning into the type 8. Now, obviously, that's not saying that all type 7s are scattered and outgoing as a way of avoiding everything. It's just with the 5s, is that when they do get unhealthy, they start to take on some of the traits of the 7. So, yeah, it's sort of, if you could imagine somebody who is often quiet by themselves, let's say a male in IT, and then all of a sudden they start to become even more scattered and care. It's like they care less about themselves in a way to distract them. And so this is one of the things about how they get disconnected from their actual body, and they stop looking after it, or if they start exercising in a way to get out of their head, then they don't have the body awareness to know when they're actually working themselves into an injury, and so it becomes an action of somewhat relief. Not all 5s will move into this idea of exercising for the sake of escaping their mind. Some of them are doing it as a very healthy thing, as any type can, but the key thing is here for the 5s is finding for them a healthy way to move into an ambivert rather than introvert or an extrovert, an ambivert being both, that allows them to feel comfortable, but it's getting out of their own head, but not from an escapism place. So the 5s really benefit from leaning into this spontaneous sort of lifestyle that will also allow them to still be connected to their body, still be grounded, and be interested in other people rather than lost in their own mind. It really leads into like an internal and externally referencing, is that often type 5s can lean into this internal referencing because they're so in their own minds that they can neglect what everyone else is what's going on for them. And so it's like they can really become depressive at the lower levels. And so it's like for them, like ending their life, it's like logically just makes sense, but they're so disconnected from the body and from everyone else that they're just looking at things logically. And so in order to do that, it's just like, well, why would anyone else care? This is my life. I don't understand what it fucking has to do with them. Which is really interesting. Yet one of the healthiest, if you look at a 5, the how with the energy of an 8, their ability to really look at, I would say if I really think about it, Neil deGrasse Tyson probably comes to mind as somebody who would be like that, and very charismatic and very, very grounded in his body. But yeah, there's an example of somebody who is very, very knowledgeable, yet at the same time able to have this extroverted edge to lean into a social situation. So there's your type 5. on a Monday morning, for those of you that might know one. If you haven't already, jump on Facebook, search Mood Prop Online, jump in and join the conversation. I'd love to see you in there. I'll put that conversation, the songs from, it's called Sleeping at Last on YouTube, by the way. I'll put the songs in the group there this week. Otherwise, you guys know the deal. Until next time, peace and pizza, kick today in the dick, and slay the dragon. I'll see you soon.
To be everything at once, be unblinded, be unlearned, be unbridled and unburned.